From West Virginia Public Broadcasting.
At the Legislature today, the House closes a loophole that previously allowed some internal state communications to be protected by the Freedom of Information Act. That legislation is now headed to the Senate for its consideration. Citizens with disabilities rally at the Capitol today to urge lawmakers to allow more independent living. And we'll visit with Speaker of the House, Rick Thompson, on the Legislature today. Good evening, I'm Beth Voorhees. The House of Delegates passed its first bills today. As Adam Cavalier reports, 3 bills have been sent on to the Senate, while a 4th goes back to the Judiciary Committee.
The first bill the House passed during the second session of the 80th West Virginia Legislature is about creating a more open government. House Bill 2402 sailed through 94-0. House Judiciary Chair Tim Miley says the bill helps to redefine the term public record in the Freedom of Information Act.
This arose out of the effort to get the emails that were between Justice Maynard and Don Blankenship a few years ago, and based upon the court's reasoning in denying that access, that we want to change the law to where those emails are reviewed in camera, and based upon this criteria will be determined whether it's subject to disclosure under our FOIA laws.
While the bill passed, House Minority Leader Tim Armstead tried to amend it, but that failed 35-59. Armstead says the amendment was not a strike against open government.
There are 2 issues. One, the actual mechanics of this law, which I think are flawed, and 2, the perception of what does the public believe about government when they feel that every time someone asks for documents, not every time, but so many times that they ask for documents, they don't get those documents because there are 19 exceptions to how those documents are distributed. I think that we can do a lot better for the people of West Virginia, and I think this is a good start. I agree with the bill, but I also think that if we reject this amendment, we will have passed up an opportunity to make our government a great deal more open to the people of West Virginia.
I rise in opposition to the amendment and urge your rejection of it for a couple of reasons. The bill that I'll be explaining here in a few minutes is fairly narrow and was introduced and passed for one reason, and the amendments offered by the gentleman from the 32nd is pretty broad and far-reaching and has significant impacts on our FOIA laws. And I say that because these issues were never brought up in Judiciary Committee. And while that in and of itself isn't a reason to be for or against an amendment on the floor, I think it does lend weight to the proposition that if you're going to make such broad sweeping changes to our laws, that it be vetted in the committee process so that we can hear from various speakers and presenters to the committee. Because what the bill does, or what his amendment does is, one, it completely eliminates an exemption that is found, from what I understand by counsel, in every state's FOIA laws in the country, as well as the federal FOIA laws, and it eliminates it without any information from agency representatives or agency heads or anybody from the executive branch or even the legislative or judicial branches that would weigh in on what internal memoranda and letters might be that might need to be kept confidential.
I simply think that if you read these words, internal memorandum or correspondence, and you think about how broad that is in terms of excluding information from disclosure, you're going to agree, I believe, with me that essentially it almost eliminates the freedom of information, because all you have to do then to, in effect, not disclose something is say, well, it was in a letter, it was in a memorandum, it was in something that we sent back and forth within. That's the crux of freedom of information.
While Armstead's amendment failed, he did vote for the bill's passage without his changes. The Public Record Bill and the 2 others that passed all made it through the House by 94-0 margins. House Bill 2521 eliminates the requirement of serving domestic violence orders by certified mail, while House Bill 3128 changes how a person found not guilty of a crime or who has had charges dismissed gets his or her record expunged. Under the bill that passed, persons no longer have to file a motion, but may instead file a civil petition. Both bills passed swiftly and without debate. On the other hand, House Bill 3132 was sent back to the House Judiciary Committee. Miley says the language of that bill needs tweaking.
The purpose of the bill was to try and prohibit people who may have been convicted of crimes from having access to certain juror information to harass them. But what it may in fact do is prevent access to this information prior to trial, especially in civil cases, by the defendant or the plaintiff to have access to that juror information and aid them in their jury selection. So I think we need to work with the language and clean it up a little bit.
That bill had passed the Judiciary Committee without debate. For West Virginia Public Broadcasting, I'm Adam Cavalier in Charleston.
The House Veterans Affairs and Homeland Security Committee met today and sent 2 bills through unanimously. House Bill 4007 will allow spouses of active servicemen and women to draw unemployment from West Virginia if the military relocates the family out of state. Unemployment Compensation Director Mike Moore says the bill would cost $41,500 a year, which he says is a drop in the division's $98 million trust fund bucket.
We're talking about the spouses who are working for most of the time, well, in this case, they would be all the time working for someone in private industry. So we think in fairness to that employer, we should not charge them for the benefits because that could affect their unemployment tax rate.
Moore estimates the bill would affect roughly 10 families in a given year. The House committee also passed a bill to provide up to 5 certified copies of a veteran's death certificate without charge. And the House Committee on Banking and Finance received 14 bills today from West Virginia's divisions of banking and insurance. Commissioner of West Virginia's Banking Division, Sally Klein, says the Mountain States banks are doing well, but there's room for improvement.
About half of our banks are displaying some signs of weaknesses or stress, so we're not immune to what's going on in the economy. Everybody knows, the economy's not doing very well with unemployment being extremely high. That obviously impacts loans at our banking institutions. But to our credit, I'm happy to report that we haven't experienced any state bank failures since 1991.
State Insurance Commissioner Mike Riley says one of the 3 bills he's proposing would normalize the rates the agency charges to file certain forms.
Regardless of the form or the rate, it'd be $125. This will be revenue neutral. We'll provide you all the detail of the history and how we arrived at that. We certainly don't anticipate that it would be any burden on the insurers filing that, and certainly wouldn't hurt the state in a fiscal impact.
The Senate Committee on Energy, Industry, and Mining killed its first bill today. The same legislation had been considered for the past 3 years.
Opposed, no. No. It appears like the noes do have it.
The proposal would have permitted the director of the State Office of Miners' Health, Safety, and Training some leeway when there's an accident at a mine. Currently, the injury or death must be reported within 15 minutes, or the mine operator faces a $100,000 fine. The legislation would have created some leeway in both reporting time and the amount of the fine. But the bill's sponsor says he's just learned the issue is dealt with in other areas of the code in the wake of the Upper Big Branch disaster. Senator Dave Seipolt says there is now no need for another law.
It was brought to my attention that there's already a provision in the code that allows some leeway if there's some circumstances beyond the control of the mine superintendent to get the reporting done on time. And that was certainly my concern. I don't think the intent of the bill was ever to make it easier to report, but only to allow some leeway in levying fine if perhaps the 15-minute time period had been not observed.
No one from the Office of Miners' Health, Safety, and Training appeared to testify concerning the bill. Dozens of groups come to lobby the legislature every year, but it's a rare day when one coalition's agenda involves spending less taxpayer money. As Bob Brunner reports, the Fair Shake Network says more senior citizens want independence rather than expensive nursing homes.
Proud for me, because we all got a disability, so everybody shout it out with me. Nothing about me without me. Yeah, this looks like a crowd for me, because we all got a disability. So
this is the Fair Shake Network. Members are trying to shake up the legislature to change its priorities on spending in the human services area. Group spokesperson David Stewart says everything is skewed toward nursing home care.
They're cutting costs on Medicaid, and yet they totally ignore the fact that it would cost less to put people in the community than it does to have them in those facilities. We're spending 70-some% of our healthcare dollars on incarcerating people instead of supporting them to live in their own homes.
Advocates like Paul Smith of Elkview say there are many citizens out there facing the same problem. They can get funding for a nursing home, but little help in staying out on their own.
It's cheaper to live for a person to live at home than it is to be institutionalized into a nursing home. So we just want people to have the right to live where they want to live.
The chair of the Fair Shake Network is Kelly Simpson of Huntington. She says lawmakers should get the message.
We just need to keep the money coming in for those programs, and also there's several other things that they're hoping to just get the support for. So we have the RIPASS, the Ron Yost Personal Assistance Program, Supportive Employment Program, and the Independent Living Program.
None of the group's proposals are yet up for legislative action. Boone County Senator Ron Stallings, who is also a physician, says there is much merit here.
Well, the largest line item in the Medicaid budget is inpatient nursing home. And so, again, I believe in high touch, low tech for our seniors. They want meals on wheels, in-home services, transportation services. That would go a long way in keeping our overall costs down.
Is that something you think you can achieve this year?
Well, again, there's a freeze on the Medicaid waiver because it's been a very popular thing. Lighthouse programs and some of those programs that do in-home care is a great thing. I think we need to expand it if at all possible. I think down the road we're going to be in trouble if we don't.
Unlike most of the groups and associations who come here to lobby and petition the legislature, this group says if their agenda is adopted, taxpayers would actually spend less. With recent cuts in federal Medicaid programs, there's a long waiting list of West Virginia seniors seeking even the most basic aid. For West Virginia Public Broadcasting, I'm Bob Brunner in Charleston.
State Medicaid costs are being paid partly from the governor's contingency fund and the current budget, and an additional $13 million is budgeted for the coming fiscal year. In a moment, we'll talk with the House Speaker about his bill to improve mine safety and other matters before the legislature. First, here's a look at some of the bills introduced in the Senate today. Among the bills introduced in the Senate today, Senate Bill 327 to provide an exemption for the official mascot of Parkersburg South High School, commonly known as the Patriot, which would allow the mascot to carry a musket on school grounds when the mascot is acting in his or her official capacity. This is the same exemption that's granted to the West Virginia University Mountaineer. Senate Bill 328 to increase the compensation from $100 to $200 for County Board of Education members who are required to attend various other meetings. Senate Bill 332 to require pawnbrokers to register with the state police and collect certain information from their customers. The bill is recommended for passage by the Joint Standing Committee on Government Organization. Senate Bill 337 to amend current law, which limits the Banking Commissioner's ability to collect information pertaining to criminal background checks and fingerprinting for officers and principals of financial institutions. Senate Bill 340 to require the West Virginia Secondary Schools Activities Commission to propose legislative rules concerning the management of concussions and head injuries in youth sports. Senate Bill 341 to provide access to private employee restrooms for persons with certain eligible medical conditions. And Senate Bill 344 requiring a total of 8 hours of instruction and firing of at least 50 rounds into a 9-inch target at a distance of 15 feet as minimum training requirements for a license to carry a deadly weapon. On second reading, the amendment stage in the Senate tomorrow, Senate Bill 96, to make it clear that a prospective juror can be disqualified from serving if the person has been convicted of any crime punishable by imprisonment in excess of 1 year or any crime involving dishonesty or false statement. House Bill 4085, introduced on Monday, would revise West Virginia's mine safety laws. The lead sponsor of the measure joins us tonight. House Speaker Rick Thompson was first elected to the House in 1980. He returned 20 years later in 2000. An attorney from Wayne County, he was first elected Speaker in 2007. Welcome, so glad you're here.
Glad to be here, Beth.
Regarding your mine safety bill, again, it was introduced on Monday. I understand that this means something personal to you. Your father died in a coal mining accident.
He did before I was born. He was killed in a mining accident by roof fall. Delegate Marshall, similar situation. She was age 6 when her father was killed, and she's a co-sponsor of the legislation along with 9 other delegates in the House, Democrat and Republican, seeking to codify what happened in the investigations that we had regarding the Upper Big Branch tragedy. And there was several findings and several recommendations. What this legislation attempts to do is our legislative duty to put the hard work of these committees and these investigations to work, pass some real meaningful safety legislation. And to both Delegate Marshall and myself, it's extremely personal because we've lived through that. We understand some of the concerns that the families may have, and we think in this legislation has many things in it that could benefit families and hopefully will prevent these types of accidents from happening ever again.
There were several investigations into the Upper Big Branch mine disaster, and you say the conclusions of these investigations are in this bill. What's the most important one?
Well, I think they're all important. I think it looks at preventing this type of conduct. The investigation has shown there was a number of violations that were repeated. There were some enforcement problems, but it didn't say how to fix those. So one part of this bill says, come back and tell us how to fix these enforcement problems. There's language in it that increases the penalties, hopefully to discourage mine operators from ignoring violations in their mines. And there's also a part in there to allow victims to have a representative during this investigation and during these hearings. And I'll tell you from personal experience, both Delegate Marshall and myself, we've lived through not knowing what happened. The only thing I knew about my dad getting killed was what my family members would tell me, or some neighbor or some friend that had happened in 1952. No record of anything. And just this past summer, one of my friends brought me a newspaper article as he was digging through some old files of buried in the newspaper, a little clip about my dad getting killed, and it mentions my mom and my brother. It doesn't mention the fact that she's about 2.5, 3 months pregnant with me. And then just recently, a few months ago, a newspaper reporter, Ken Ward, brought me the actual MSHA investigation. It was about 2 or 3 pages and went through step by step what that investigation found. And I'm just now learning that. This is 59 years later. I mean, it's amazing and I think that adds insult to the injury by the family not knowing what happened. And I hope this piece of legislation gives the family the benefit of knowing what's going on.
So there was an investigation at the time that your father died?
There was.
What did they conclude here?
That the owner of the mine had several violations and he was charged in JP court. It doesn't say what happened to those charges, but it says he was charged with a crime for the violations of not having improper roof support system. Gone on this long, and I say it's time we try to do something to stop it. The last legislation we passed in 2001 was more to what to do after it occurs. This legislation is more to try to prevent these kinds of accidents and tragedies from occurring, and I sure hope it passes.
Did your mother receive any kind of compensation? Did she file a lawsuit or anything like that?
Nothing.
Nothing
no
like
compensation whatsoever.
No.
I was talking with Delegate Marshall, and she thinks they may have gotten $5 a child or something, but we did not get anything. My family did. My grandparents raised me mostly, but he worked in a nursery digging trees.
So interesting that just now you found out about the circumstances of your father's death.
Yeah, and the newspaper report is different than the MSHA report. The newspaper report says that the carbide lamp was knocked off my father's head, and it ignited some blasting powder. That occurred, but it was my uncle, my dad's brother, who was with him in the mine. As they tried to get away, his hat was knocked off and started the fire and burned his hands in the tragedy. The rock, just a big rock, fell on my dad and killed him.
Where did this happen?
It happened in Wayne County, a place called Glen Hayes. It's a small mine. They got about 300 ton of coal a year, digging through about 100 yards back in the mine, and they would sell it to the farmers and stuff for heating coal. He'd worked about 6 months in the mine when the accident occurred. Yes.
Now, getting back to the Upper Big Branch mine disaster, the agreement between the U.S. Attorney and Alpha Natural Resources that settled requires the coal company to make investments in mine safety technology. Is there anything in your legislation that would affect what the U.S. Attorney has told Alpha to do? Is there anything in cross purposes here? No, I don't believe so. The legislation also requires an automatic cutoff of the machines if the methane level exceeds 1.25%. We've had a bill in the legislature for many years now that attempted to impose a cutoff on these machines because it's 1% is what is allowed. You're supposed to stop production at 1%. And the bill said 1%. Well, we had some pushback, so it was sent to the Coal Mine Safety Board, and they recommended, because of fluctuations, that it shut off at 1.25%. And that's what's in this bill at this time. Are you getting any pushback from the Mining Association and the coal companies regarding your legislation? Because it's pretty strong. There's pretty strong language in there that says if miners feel their working conditions are not safe, they can walk out. I haven't yet. I look forward to hearing from them. I think everybody should want the mines to be safer. And these investigations were very pointed in saying that had these violations not have occurred and continued to exist, then the Upper Big Branch tragedy would not have occurred. And they repeated them. They had procedures to give advance notice of inspections. This bill makes that a felony to do that, to let them know that they were coming in so they could hide or fix anything. And that's just not right. It's not right that those miners had to die. You said the operator of your father's coal mine was taken into JP court, with Justice of the Peace Court. Should the individuals involved with Upper Big Branch mine explosion be prosecuted in your view? Well, I'm not part of the federal investigation as to who did what, and my understanding is that that's still ongoing. I would hope that if they find criminal conduct, that whoever's guilty of criminal conduct be prosecuted. Should miners be tested for drugs? Well, I don't think that's part of this legislation, mainly because the findings show that that was not involved in this. And I think my understanding is that most places miners are already drug tested. There's drug testing, but they do different things in different places. I think as long as it's consistent and everybody's tested in a fair manner, then I think that the miners probably would be all right with drug testing, as long as everybody has to do it, not just the miner, even the subcontractors and everyone else. The governor is proposing mine safety legislation as well. Yes, and I'm glad he is. Whether it's yours or whether it's his, does it really matter? It does not. And the governor's bill will take priority. If his bill comes in with mine safety, what we will do is take my bill and blend it into the governor's bill, because his bill would be a priority item. Very interesting. I'm afraid we're out of time and we can't touch on any other issues, but we'll be talking with you throughout the session. Sounds good, Beth. Thanks for having me. Speaker Rick Thompson, thank you very much. And now here's a look at some of the bills introduced in the House today. Among the bills introduced in the House today, House Bill 4104 to authorize professional licensing boards to exempt licensees from continuing education requirements when they've been licensed for 20 years or more. House Bill 4110 to require all state agencies to review its rules every 4 years to identify and address redundancies that can improve efficiency, reduce paperwork, and decrease costs to state government. House Bill 4112 to create a commission on streamlining government. The bill states that many state agencies were created over 30 years ago, and a review of all agencies and its activities, functions, programs, and services is needed to determine whether the purpose served by the agency continues to be relevant. House Bill 4113 to increase the number of municipalities that may participate in the Home Rule Pilot Program from the current 5 to 7, and requires that changes to a municipality's tax structure or authority be approved by the voters. and House Bill 4123 to enact the Public Safety and Offender Accountability Act to determine the fiscal impact for any bill that proposes to increase, decrease, or otherwise impact incarceration. This bill was recommended for passage by the Joint Committee on the Judiciary. On second reading, the amendment stage in the House tomorrow, House Bill 2533, to require the identities of duly registered voters who sign a petition for a person seeking ballot access be made public, and House Bill 4072, to eliminate a general provision requiring county boards of education to meet on the first Monday of July of every year. And this has been the Legislature Today. Tomorrow, we'll hear from Republican leaders about the party's agenda for this legislative session. Our guests will be Senate Minority Leader Mike Hall and House Minority Leader Tim Armstead. We welcome your comments about our legislative coverage via email. Our address is feedback@wvpubcast.org, or address your letters to the Legislature Today, West Virginia Public Broadcasting, 600 Capitol Street, Charleston, 25301. I'm Beth Voorhees. Thanks for joining us. Good night.